Welcome to Science for Sleepy Minds. You can let those words arrive softly, as if someone has just stepped quietly into a dim room and is speaking from a gentle distance. You do not have to open your eyes or move at all. You can simply listen from where you are, lying down, maybe curled under a blanket, maybe just beginning to notice how tired your body really is. This is a place where nothing urgent has to happen, and nothing is expected of you. You're allowed to just be here, exactly as you are. If your thoughts feel busy, if your chest feels a little tight from the day, that is completely all right. So many things ask for your attention when you are awake. This is a corner of time where we set all of that down, like setting a heavy bag on the floor. You do not need to fix your thoughts or push anything away. You only need to hear a calm voice and let your mind wander. Tonight, we're going to drift back in time, far across deserts and along a long, shining river, into the quiet remnants of an ancient world. We will be visiting the lost science of ancient Egypt, and asking very gently what they knew long before we did. Not in a dramatic, breathless way, not in a rush to solve mysteries, but in the slow, sleepy way you might walk through a museum after closing time, when everything is still and softly lit. We will wander along the Nile in our imaginations. We will watch how people once studied the stars, measured their land, healed the sick, and crafted the world around them, all without the words we use now, like physics or chemistry or engineering. Their science moved through the river and the sky, through stone and plant and bone. And you do not need to remember any of it. If you drift in and out, if your mind slips away halfway through a sentence, that is not a problem. That is part of the design. You're not here to pass a test or to repeat any of this back. This is science as a lullaby, knowledge as a soft blanket for your thoughts. You can let go of the need to hold on. Everything that needs to stay with you will stay on its own, without effort. The pace tonight will be unhurried. We will stay with simple images for a while, letting them stretch and breathe, only gradually moving into deeper ideas. Like the Nile itself, our journey will bend and slow, and sometimes linger in quiet pools. You are welcome to follow along with full attention, or to float on top of the words like driftwood, touching down only now and then. If you enjoy these sleepy journeys, if you find they help you loosen the day and settle into rest, you might decide another time to like this or subscribe so you can find your way back. But that choice belongs to a different moment, a waking version of you. Right now, there is no need to do anything at all. All of that can wait for tomorrow. For now, we'll begin by helping your body remember what it feels like to soften. You do not have to force relaxation, just a gentle invitation, a suggestion, like opening a window to let in cooler air. If it feels comfortable, you can bring a little awareness to your breath. Notice the way air moves in and then moves out. If you prefer, you can breathe in through your nose and let the breath drift out through your mouth, a little slower than it came in. No need to count, no need to control, just a slight lengthening of the exhale, like a sigh that forgot to be dramatic and became peaceful instead. You might feel your chest rise and fall. Maybe your ribs expand a little. Maybe you can sense the air brushing past the tip of your nose or the back of your throat. There is nothing special you need to do with this. Just notice that breathing is already happening for you quietly, without you needing to supervise it. Let your attention rest for a moment on your face. You might not change anything at first, just notice. Is your forehead scrunched even a little? Is there a small furrow between your eyebrows, left over from focusing or worrying? If you like, you can imagine a warm breeze passing over your forehead, smoothing those lines, softening the skin, asking the muscles to loosen just a bit. Let that same warmth travel to your eyes. You do not have to move them. They can stay closed or half closed. Imagine them sinking a little deeper into the cushions of their sockets, as if the earth itself is supporting them. If your eyelids want to grow heavier, you can let them. If they are already closed, you might notice the darkness behind them, like a soft velvet curtain. Bring that gentle attention to your jaw. So many thoughts and words pass through that space during the day. You might notice your teeth pressing lightly together, or your tongue holding tension against the roof of your mouth. See if there is any tiny bit you can release. Perhaps let your tongue rest like a small boat floating in calm water. Let a bit of space open between your molars, even if it is very subtle. Now, the back of your neck and your shoulders. Imagine that warm breeze again, this time like air moving through tall reeds at the edge of a river, whispering softly as it goes. As the breeze passes through your neck, your shoulders, your upper back, it invites the muscles there to let go of what they are carrying. Your shoulders might drop a millimeter deeper into the bed or pillow. The top of your spine might feel just a little more supported. Let that relaxation trickle down your arms, past your elbows, into your wrists and into your hands. You do not need to arrange your hands in any particular way. They can be palms up, palms down, one tucked under your cheek, one under a blanket. Whatever is easiest. Just imagine that they grow heavier, as if gravity has turned into something kind and steady holding them in place. Now your chest and your upper back, the space that expands with each breath. Notice if there is any tightness or heaviness there. You do not need to push it away. Instead, imagine a glow of warm light in the center of your chest. The color of sunlight on sandstone, soft and golden. With every inhale, that light brightens a little. With every exhale, it spreads outward, coating the inside of your chest, your ribs, your back muscles like liquid warmth. Allow this glow to move further down into your stomach and your lower back. Your belly does not have to be held in or braced. It is safe here for it to be as soft as it wants to be, rising gently with each breath, like the surface of a calm lake when a small breeze passes over it. Your lower back can sink into whatever is supporting you, giving up its effort, trusting that for now it does not have to hold you upright. Let your awareness move into your hips, your thighs, your knees. Picture the warmth flowing like a slow river through those large muscles, washing away the tiny bits of tension created by standing, walking, or sitting all day. Your legs can feel heavier, more anchored, as if they are resting in soft sand that holds their shape perfectly. Down through your calves, your shins, into your ankles and feet. Imagine the soles of your feet remembering what it feels like to be barefoot on a warm, smooth stone, one that has been warmed all day by the sun and is now releasing that heat back to you in the cool of the evening. Each toe can soften one by one without you needing to name them, just a general sense of release. If you would like, you can adjust your position one last time, maybe tuck a pillow a little closer, smooth the blanket. Find that angle where your neck feels best supported. Imagine you are making your bed into a little sanctuary, like a quiet alcove hidden deep inside a temple, reserved for rest and nothing else. Once you are there, you do not have to move again unless you truly want to. Now that your body has been gently acknowledged, we can shift your inner gaze outward into a shared dream of another time. To help your mind settle, you might like to imagine yourself lying not only where you are now, but also on a slow, safe boat drifting down a broad river at dusk. The water beneath you is steady. You can feel the almost imperceptible rocking of the boat, like the faintest sway of a cradle. Around you, the world is turning from gold to blue to deep indigo as the sun sinks beyond the horizon. The day's heat is dissolving into a pleasant coolness that touches your skin like the whisper of silk. On the far bank of the river, you can see the silhouettes of palms and tall grasses, like brush strokes in ink against the fading sky. A few distant lamps glow in mud brick houses, their light soft and steady, not piercing. You might hear the low murmur of voices far away, carrying over the water and then fading, like a conversation that drifts in through an open window, and then disappears. Somewhere a pot is set down with a faint, hollow clink. Then more quiet. The river smells faintly of earth and life. You can imagine the scent of wet soil, rich with the memory of floods that have come and gone for longer than anyone can remember. Above you the first stars have begun to appear, shyly at first, then with more confidence as the sky darkens. Their reflections ripple in the water, stretching and shrinking as the current moves. This is the Nile, thousands of years ago, and yet somehow also right now, inside your mind. Night after night it has flowed between its banks, listening in silence to the footsteps and the stories of the people who live along its edges. If you listen with your imagination, you might sense generations of farmers, builders, healers, and priests who have stood on these shores, waiting for the subtle changes that tell them what will come next. Look up in your mind's eye at the sky above this ancient river. Here, far from modern city lights, the stars are thick, like sand scattered across a dark, endless floor. You may recognize some shapes from your own sky. The belt of Orion rising from the horizon, the bright glimmer of Sirius arriving in the early morning. They move slowly and predictably, turning the night into a grand cosmic clock. For the people who watch this sky every night, these lights were not just decoration. They were guides, markers, clues. They rose and set in patterns that seemed to speak, if you are patient enough to listen. Imagine lying on a rooftop or on packed earth near the river, watching those lights and tracing their paths in your mind night after night. The steady motion could be as comforting as the ticking of a clock on a bedside table. As the village on the shore settles into sleep, the sounds grow fewer. A donkey brays once softly, and then even that is still. A door closes with a wooden thud somewhere in the dark. A child's laugh, quickly hushed, fades out. The world narrows to the hush of water against the sides of your little boat, the thread of your breathing, and the low murmur of the night insects, steady and unobtrusive. In this quiet, it is easier to notice the small things, the way the river always seems to rise at a certain time of year, the way the stars appear in certain positions when the flood begins, the way seasons roll and repeat themselves, as if the world is inhaling and exhaling in a very slow, very large breath. Long before there were words like data, model, statistic, there were people like this, watching the river and the sky with patient eyes, feeling that there was order in the world, even if they could not yet name it in the way we do now. Their laboratory was the land they lived on. Their instruments were their own senses, honed over years, sharpened by the simple need to survive and to thrive. Much of what they knew lies scattered now. Scrolls burned, papyrus crumbled, knowledge passed from mouth to ear and then lost in the noise of time, but fragments remain. Measurements carved into stone, temples aligned so precisely with the directions of the earth that we still marvel at their accuracy. Healing recipes written in careful ink, star charts painted on the ceilings of tombs and shrines. We call it lost science because so many steps in the chain have been broken. We do not always know how they knew what they knew, or exactly how they figured it out, but we can see that they did know. There is a quiet beauty in that partial understanding, in the way the past reveals itself in hints and clues rather than complete instructions. Tonight, we will move through some of those hints, one by one, like walking through different rooms of a very old house by candlelight. We will talk about the river and the seasons, the stones and their angles, the stars used to tell time, the ways the body was studied and cared for, the numbers and measures that kept life organized, and the crafts that turned raw materials into objects that have lasted for thousands of years. As we do, remember that you do not need to follow every detail. If your attention fades for a moment, or if you find yourself thinking about something else entirely, that's perfectly fine. You can always come back to the river, the stones, the stars, just by noticing the sound of the words again. For now, we will begin with the rhythm that shaped everything in this ancient world, the steady rising and falling of the Nile. You already know what it is like to live with seasons. Even if you do not think about them often, your body has felt the shift of light across the year. Days growing shorter or longer, temperatures changing, the quiet cues that tell plants when to bloom and birds when to move on. Perhaps you notice the way the air smells different at certain times of year, or how the colours outside your window slowly change. The people of ancient Egypt lived by a season that was far more immediate and dramatic, the yearly flood of the Nile. Almost everything depended on it. When the river rose, it spilled over its banks and spread across the flatland, leaving behind a layer of dark, fertile silt as it receded. This silt was a gift, making the narrow strip of land on either side of the river rich enough to grow crops that could feed a civilization. But floods were not always gentle. Sometimes the water rose too high, soaking fields and homes. Sometimes it did not rise enough, leaving the soil dry and the harvest uncertain. For people whose lives depended on this cycle, understanding the river was not a hobby. It was a necessity. Imagine living in a small house near the water's edge. Each year, at a certain point, you begin to notice the river creeping higher, climbing its banks, turning dry patches into shallow lakes. You might draw a line on the wall to mark how high the water reached that year. You might mark another line the next year, and another after that. Over time, this becomes a memory carved into stone. Eventually, people built special structures just to watch the river's behavior. Pits, or staircases leading down to the water, where the level could be measured against carved marks. These were early versions of what we now call nilometers. A priest or official might descend the cool steps lit by faint light to see how far the water had come. Was it higher than last year at this time or lower? What might that mean for the months ahead, for the fields, for the people? But what tells you when the flood will come? You cannot control the river, but perhaps you can see its approach in the sky. Night after night, observers watched for specific stars, noting when they first appeared just before dawn. One star in particular, Sirius, became a powerful marker. Its rising close to sunrise came to be linked with the beginning of the new year and the swell of the Nile. It is not so different from how you might notice that a certain chill in the air means autumn is on the way, or that the angle of sunlight at the end of the day changes as winter approaches. When we pay attention, we notice patterns, and patterns bring comfort. They tell us, this has happened before, it will likely happen again. In Egypt, these patterns were turned into a calendar. Days, months, and seasons tied to the behavior of the river, the sky, and the land. At first, this may have been as simple as counting days between notable events, the appearance of a star, the arrival of the flood, the time of planting. Over generations, the counting became more precise, more structured. A year began to take on a shape in their minds, a cycle they could rely on. You can imagine a scribe sitting in a shaded room with a reed brush in hand, marking down these observations on a long strip of papyrus. Outside, the light is bright, but inside the room, the air is cooler and still. There may be the faint scratch of brush on fibre, the smell of ink made from soot and plant gum. Each mark on the papyrus turns the fleeting movement of water and stars into something more lasting, something that can be shared. Farmers listened to these patterns. They learned when to prepare their fields, when to plant, when to expect the river to overflow. The data they used might be carved into stone walls or written on papyrus scrolls, but it was also held in memory, in stories told at the end of the day, in advice passed from older generations to younger ones. It is easy to imagine science as something that lives only in modern laboratories, but the kind of careful observation and record-keeping that the Egyptians practiced is deeply scientific. They watched, they compared, they noticed when something was out of step with previous years. They made decisions based on those observations. If you listen closely to your own life, you might notice similar patterns that bring you comfort. Maybe you know that a certain tree on your street always blossoms around the same time, or that you tend to feel more energetic at some hours and more tired at others. Maybe you notice how your mood shifts with the amount of sunlight you see. Recognizing these patterns does not require fancy equipment. It only requires attention and time. There is a quiet reassurance in seeing that the world around you moves in cycles rather than pure randomness. The Egyptians felt this deeply. The Nile rose and fell, the stars followed their paths, the seasons repeated. In a harsh environment, that sense of order was a kind of safety. You can imagine standing on the riverbank at dawn, cool sand under your feet, watching the first faint hint of pink in the eastern sky. As the sun pushes its way up, the water glows in bands of colour, and you might see that it has reached a certain familiar mark on the shore. You think of previous years when the water stood here, and you remember what the harvest was like then. Inside your mind, the river has become not just a body of water, but a teacher, speaking in a slow language of inches and days. All of this measuring and remembering gathered itself into a system, an early science of floods and seasons. The people did not call it that, of course. To them it was simply life, the way you learn to read the feeling of your own body, the way you know you are getting sick before a thermometer can confirm it. But when we look back, we can see the outlines of a method, a logic. As you rest here, you might reflect gently on how humans everywhere, in every time, have sought out patterns to feel a little less at the mercy of the unknown. We check the weather report now before leaving the house. They watch the sky and the river. We look at calendars on our phones. They scratched calendars into walls and memorized them as songs. The comfort is the same, the sense that tomorrow has some shape, that it will not arrive completely unannounced. That even if we do not control everything, there is a rhythm we can lean into. You do not need to hold all of these images precisely. You might let them blur a little, like paint bleeding gently across paper. A boat on a river, a priest descending stone steps to read the water's height, a farmer watching the dawn sky and thinking of last year's flood. The details can fade in and out as you breathe. We have begun in this quiet way to see how science can grow out of simple, repeated noticing. From here, you may feel your mind becoming heavier, like a stone gently settling at the bottom of a shallow pool. If you find yourself drifting now, that's all right. The river will keep flowing, and when you are ready, we will follow it further, from the soft mud of the fields to the solid, patient stones that rise above the desert. If you are still awake, you can notice that the river in your mind has brought you here, to the edge of the desert, where the ground feels a little firmer beneath your feet. If you drifted off for a while and have just returned, that is perfectly all right. You have not missed anything you needed. The story of this ancient place is like the Nile itself. It keeps flowing and you can step back into it at any bend. Take a moment to feel your body again, resting where you are. Notice the weight of your head on the pillow, the warmth of the blanket or the air across your skin. You might let your breath deepen just a little, in and out, as if you're sighing without sound. This is still your time to rest. The words are here only as a gentle background, like distant music from another room. We followed the soft mud of the fields, the water that rises and falls, the invisible lines of calendars drawn out of the sky. Now, in your imagination, the land begins to rise slightly, and so do the shapes built upon it. The world of fields and reeds opens into a world of stone. Before we step fully into that world, you might like to picture something familiar. The room around you. Even with your eyes closed, you probably know where the walls are, where the ceiling meets them, where the corners are. You might be able to remember the shape of your door, the outline of your window, the square or rectangle of your bed. Without thinking about it, you navigate a world of straight lines and angles every day. The edge of a table, the corner of a book, the rectangle of a screen. Even if you dislike geometry in school, your body has always been fluent in it, turning corners, judging distances, avoiding bumping into things. Now, imagine taking that same quiet awareness of shapes and stretching it out across a landscape. Instead of the walls of a bedroom, think of stone walls that rise into the clear sky. Instead of the edge of a table, think of the straight boundary between one patch of land and the next. Instead of a small square of light from your window, think of the vast triangular faces of a pyramid catching the sun. For the people of ancient Egypt, geometry, lines, angles, shapes was not just an abstract game, it was a tool for living. Each year, the Nile's flood would rearrange the edges of the fields, like a hand smudging chalk lines on a board. Boundary markers might be washed away, paths blurred, the edges between one person's land and another's softened by water and silt. After the flood receded, the land would be refreshed, dark and fertile and ready for planting. But where did one plot end and the next begin? Who owned which slice of the precious surface? To answer that, someone had to measure. Imagine a group of people walking out into the newly exposed land at dawn. The air is cool and the ground still carries traces of moisture. They carry ropes coiled over their shoulders, stakes tucked under their arms, simple tools that in their hands become instruments of precision. These are surveyors, sometimes called rope stretchers in old stories about Egypt. Their work is both ordinary and quietly remarkable. They might drive a stake into the ground at one corner of a field, pull a rope taut, and set another stake where the rope ends. Then another and another, walking the boundaries slowly, like tracing a shape in the sand. The rope might have knots tied in it at regular intervals, marking out equal lengths. The surveyors know how to form right angles, how to lay out rectangles that will fit together neatly, with no land left unclaimed in between. You can imagine them kneeling to pull the rope tight, the fibres rough under their fingers, the smell of damp earth rising around them. A bird calls from a nearby reed bed. The river glints in the distance. It is quiet work, requiring concentration, but also a kind of rhythm, like a slow, careful dance with the land. Perhaps they use something like a 3-4-5 triangle, though they do not call it that. They know that when they mark out a triangle with side lengths in certain proportions, the corner opposite the longest side forms a perfect right angle. They may not have written down the proof in symbols, but they have learned the pattern through repeated practice, through trial and error, through shared knowledge passed along like a melody taught by ear. As fields are measured and boundaries set, the land becomes a patchwork of shapes. Seen from above, it might look like an intricate quilt of rectangles and squares, each one representing a family's space, their work, their portion of the harvest. Geometry becomes a quiet agreement. This line is yours, that line is mine, and the angles between them make a shared world that feels fair and knowable. From this everyday geometry comes the confidence to attempt something much grander, not just measuring the land, but reshaping the horizon with stone. Think again of your own room, the corners where the walls meet, the ceiling flat above you. Builders and planners in Egypt took that same basic language and applied it on an astonishing scale, arranging blocks of stone into structures that are still standing millennia later. Imagine walking toward one of these structures in the early morning, when the sky is pale and the air still cool. At first it rises out of the haze as a strange angling shape almost too large for your mind to grasp. As you draw closer, the edges become clearer. 4 long sides all sloping up toward a single point, each face a flat, precise plane. The ground beneath your feet is sand and dust, but the structure itself is firm and sharp-edged, each block of stone placed with careful intention. Its base is aligned almost perfectly with the cardinal directions, north, south, east and west. How did they manage such precision, using only the tools available to them at the time? You can imagine them watching shadows, using the sun as a guide. A simple upright stick in the ground, what we might call a gnomon, casts a shadow that moves as the day passes. By watching the way the shadow shortens and lengthens, the way it swings one way and then the other, they can find the true north-south line. Over many days, many attempts, the pattern becomes clear. Once that line is known, it can be transferred onto the ground with stakes and ropes. From that central orientation, the rest of the structure can be laid out. The corners of a pyramid's base are marked, ropes stretched between them, angles checked and rechecked. The position of each corner is the result of countless small decisions made by anonymous hands, all guided by a sense of direction that begins with the sky itself. But knowing where to place a pyramid is only part of the challenge. The rest is understanding how to build it so that it stays standing. Stone is heavy, and weight has its own rules. If too much mass presses in one place, something will crack. If the blocks are not aligned well, they might shift over time. The Egyptians, through long practice, learned how their materials behaved. They learned how wide a base needed to be to support a certain height. They learned what angles allowed the sides to rise without collapsing. You might picture a group of workers, their muscles tired but steady, hauling a stone block into position on a ramp. There is strain but also the control as they inch the block forward, guided by the overseers who watch its alignment carefully. The block settles into the place prepared for it, fitting against its neighbours with a satisfying closeness. Above them, the sky is wide and mostly empty. Below their hands, the structure slowly becomes more than a collection of pieces. Inside these great stone forms, corridors and chambers snake through the mass. Some of them are carefully aligned with stars or with certain points on the horizon where the sun rises or sets at key times of year. It is as if the building itself is participating in the cycles of nature, rooted in the earth but tuned to the sky. For the Egyptians, geometry did not float somewhere above daily life as a set of detached rules. It was soaked in meaning. A square might represent stability, a solid foundation. A circle might echo the shape of the sun, endless and returning. Proportions could have symbolic significance. The way a temple's dimensions related to one another was not just pleasing to the eye, but resonant with spiritual ideas about balance and harmony. Imagine standing in the cool shade of a temple hall, columns rising around you like a stone forest. The walls are carved and painted with scenes of gods, people, plants, animals, and symbols. Light filters in from high openings, falling in slender shafts that pick out certain lines and shapes. Even if you do not understand the language of the inscriptions, you can feel, that the space has been created with care, with the sense of proportion that makes it feel both vast and contained, grand and yet somehow human-scaled. In such a place, the act of measuring, of ensuring that one wall is perpendicular to another, that the floor is level, that the roof stones rest securely on their supports, is both practical and sacred. To build something crooked or unstable would not only risk collapse, it would feel like a failure to match the order believed to exist in the universe. Our modern idea of science often separates the physical from the spiritual, the measurable from the meaningful. But in ancient Egypt, those threads were woven together. A straight line could be both a technical achievement and a symbol of truth. An angle could be a way to distribute weight and a way to echo a divine pattern. You might think of the pyramids and temples as silent books, their pages made of stone. Instead of words and equations on paper, they contain ratios, angles, alignments embedded in their shape. If you had the right kind of eye, you could read them, understanding how weight is carried, how space is divided, how direction are set. Now imagine yourself resting at the base of such a structure in the cool of evening. The sun has dipped low, and the stones are releasing the warmth they stored all day. You lean your back against them, feeling their solidity, their rough texture under your fingers. Above you, the lines of the pyramid or the temple roof rise in clean, unwavering paths toward the sky. There is a kind of comfort in that firmness. These shapes have endured winds and sandstorms, the passing of thousands of years. The people who set these stones are gone, their names mostly forgotten, but the logic they use is still visible. It is like hearing the echo of a thought long after the voice that spoke it has faded. You do not have to solve that geometry in your head. You do not need to calculate angles or slopes. It is enough to feel in your imagination the steady presence of those lines, the way they anchor the landscape. In a world that can sometimes feel chaotic and unpredictable, there is a quiet reassurance in knowing that some patterns are stable, that some decisions made long ago still hold. Perhaps you can let this image blend with your own experience of structure and support, the way your mattress holds your weight tonight, the way the walls around you stand firm, keeping out wind and weather, the way the beams or concrete above your head form a roof that has held through many nights like this one. Geometry, in its simplest sense, is what allows these things to exist without falling. It is an invisible agreement between shapes and forces, honoured again and again. As your breath continues its slow rhythm, you might gently turn your attention upward again from stone back to sky, because for the Egyptians, the stones and the sky were not separate stories. They were chapters of the same book. The same people who measured fields and laid out pyramids also spent long, quiet hours looking up at the stars, tracing their movements, finding patterns in their patient dance. Have you ever stepped outside at night, far from city lights, and looked up to see more stars than you could easily count? Maybe you felt for a moment very small but also strangely comforted, as if you were part of something vast and orderly. Even if you have not had that experience in person, you can imagine it. A clear, dark vault overhead, scattered with points of light, some steady, some twinkling softly. For an ancient Egyptian lying on their back near the riverbank, or on the flat roof of a house, that sky was a familiar companion. Night after night, year after year, the stars rose and set in patterns that became as known to them as the daily course of the sun is to us. They gave names to constellations, told stories about them, imagined boats and animals and deities moving across the heavens. But beyond the stories, they also noticed something more practical. Certain groups of stars rose at particular times of the night and at particular times of the year. If you watched carefully, you could use these rising times to tell time in the dark, long before mechanical clocks existed. These star groups are often called decans. Each decan rose over the horizon roughly at a different hour of the night, though their system of hours is not exactly the same as ours. A priest or observer might lie on a rooftop, wrapped in a cloak against the slight chill, watching for the moment when a familiar pattern of stars just peeks above the horizon. When it appears, they know that a certain portion of the night has passed. You can picture this observer blinking up into the darkness, their eyes adapted to its depth. Around them, the village is mostly asleep. The sounds of the day have faded, leaving only the whisper of the river and the occasional rustle of a small animal in the distance. The sky is their clock. Each new constellation that appears is like the chiming of a bell, silent but clear. There is something soothing about this kind of timekeeping. It is slow, unhurried, requiring patience and a willingness to be still. To measure the night by stars is to surrender to a larger rhythm, to accept that the hours will pass at their own pace. Just as you now might glance at the glowing numbers of a digital clock beside your bed, they look to the glowing points overhead. The technologies are different, but the impulse is the same, to know where we are in the flow of time, to mark our place in the long, dark span between dusk and dawn. If your eyelids are growing heavier as you picture this, that is all right. You might imagine yourself lying there too, on a flat rooftop in ancient Egypt, the stone beneath you cooled by the night air, a simple cushion under your head. The river's presence is a dark ribbon nearby, its surface reflecting a scattering of stars. Around you the world is quiet. Above you the sky turns slowly. Somewhere below, the stones of temples and pyramids hold their steady lines, and somewhere nearby the fields await the next flood. All of it, water, land, stone and sky, is part of a single patient observation that has gone on for generations. You're just passing through that observation for a while as a guest. You can stay as long as you like, or you can let sleep take you, gently and gradually knowing that the stars will keep moving and the river will keep flowing whether you are watching or not. If you are still awake, you might notice that you have been lying under this ancient sky for a while now, peacefully watching the stars in your imagination. If you slipped into sleep and are only just now returning, that is completely okay. You have not missed anything you needed. These stories do not demand your memory. They are here the way the stars are. You can look up at any time and there will always be a gentle pattern waiting for you. Feel again the way your body rests where it is, the weight of your head, the quiet presence of your hands, the way your breath goes in and out without asking for your attention. If you feel like sighing, you can. If you feel like sinking just a little deeper into your bed, you can allow that too. The river and the sky and the stone will still be here, as soft images moving slowly in your mind. We were lying on a rooftop by the Nile, watching the night unfold. The stars were our clock, rising in their careful order, each group marking a little step through the hours until dawn. Among those lights, one star mattered in a special way. You may know it today as Sirius, bright and insistent in the early morning sky. To the people of ancient Egypt, its appearance just before the sunrise was a moment of great importance. Imagine the horizon just before dawn, a wash of deep blue beginning to thin toward grey. The air is cool, carrying the faint scent of the river and the distant fields. For many nights, the sky before dawn has been empty in a certain place, the brightness of the sun arriving too quickly for a particular star to be seen. But now, after many days of waiting, there it is again, just for a brief moment before the rising light erases it, a small piercing point shimmering close to the line where earth and sky touch. This rising of Sirius, in the time before the flood, became a signal for the new year. It told people that the cycle was turning again, that soon the Nile would swell and spread its nourishing waters across the land. It was as if the sky itself whispered a quiet, "Now," giving the people a little chance to prepare their hearts and their fields. Think of what it must have felt like to know that this star would return just on time, heralding the river's gift. In a world that could be harsh and unpredictable, this steady relationship between a point of light in the sky and the water on the earth must have brought a deep sense of reassurance. It is similar to the feeling you might have when you notice the light changing at a familiar time of year, a gentle affirmation that you are moving through a larger pattern, not just drifting alone. The Egyptians recorded their fascination with the sky not only in the way they watched it, but also in the way they decorated their sacred spaces. Imagine stepping into a temple or a tomb chamber, away from the bright glare of the sun. Inside, the air is cooler, denser, as if it has weight. The walls and ceilings are painted with patterns and figures, some of them very familiar. Stars, constellations, boats carrying gods across the firmament, curved lines tracing the path of the scheme. Look up in your mind's eye at one of those painted ceilings, deep blue, like the night sky even in the middle of the day. Gold stars scattered across it in neat, intentional rows. Perhaps there are human figures or animal forms intertwined with the constellations, weaving the stories of the gods into the map of the heavens. Lying under such a ceiling, you might feel as if you were floating between the world of the earth and the world of the sky, at a crossroads of stone and starlight. These painted maps were not only decorative, they held information about which stars rose when, how the sky turned over the course of the year, how the deacons marked the hours. For priests and scribes, these images were like a book. For us, they are a reminder that people long ago were paying close, careful attention to the same stars we see when we look up now. If you let your mind drift over this scene, you might notice how in all of this, there is a relationship between time and comfort. To know the length of the night, to be able to say, now it is this hour, and soon the light will come, is to have a bit of stability in the darkness. The Egyptians measured these lengths by watching when particular deacons rose and set, turning the sky into a gentle cosmic schedule. You might think of how you sometimes keep an eye on the time when you cannot sleep. Perhaps you glance at a clock, see that an hour has passed, and feel a little rush of concern or relief. For them, there were no glowing numbers, no ticking hands. There were only the stars carrying out their silent procession. Observing that procession required patience and quiet attention. It was a kind of meditation, even if they did not call it that. When they looked up and saw that the familiar patterns were in their expected places, that Sirius rose when it should, that the deacons followed their known order, they could feel that the world was still in balance. In a sense, the sky reassured them. Nothing fundamental has slipped. The great cycles still continue. You might bring that feeling into your own body right now. Even if your thoughts have been restless, even if sleep has felt far away at times, there are rhythms in you that continue reliably. Your heart has been beating steadily from long before you were aware of it. Your lungs rise and fall, your cells carry on with their quiet work. These inner patterns are like your own personal sky, repeating themselves with a patient confidence. If your mind wants something to picture, you can imagine your breath as a small boat crossing a night river. On the inhale, it glides forward, the prow lifting slightly as it moves. On the exhale, it settles, leaving a soft wake behind. Above it, the stars turn in their slow circles, unconcerned with hurry. No one is demanding that the boat arrive anywhere in particular. It is enough that it moves and rests and moves again. The Egyptians, watching this interplay of river and sky, of cycles on the earth and cycles above, were doing something deeply human. They were listening for patterns, seeking steadiness in the midst of change. In this way, their astronomy was not just a matter of naming stars. It was a way of feeling held by the universe, of trusting that tomorrow would come, that the seasons would return, that life would continue. From this vast canvas of the heavens, let us gently turn our gaze back closer to the ground, to something intimately familiar to you, the human body itself. Because while some Egyptians were watching stars and measuring floods, others were studying the mysteries of flesh and bone, trying to understand how to ease pain, how to heal. You know what it feels like to be ill, at least in small ways. A sore throat that makes swallowing uncomfortable, a heavy, achy tiredness when you have a fever, a cut that stings, a bruise that blooms under the skin. You also know what it feels like to be cared for in those moments. Someone bringing you a glass of water, a warm drink, a blanket, a cool hand on your forehead, soft words saying, "Rest now." This simple experience of being unwell and being tended to is a thread that connects you directly to the people of ancient Egypt. They too felt pain. They too worried over loved ones. They too wondered, what is happening inside the body when it hurts, and what might make it better? In temple complexes and in special houses of healing, there were individuals whose role was to care for the sick and injured. We might think of them as physicians or healers. Some of them wrote down what they saw and what they did on papyrus scrolls, creating early medical texts that have, by some miracle, survived in fragments to our time. Imagine such a healer in a quiet room. Perhaps it is lit by oil lamps, their gentle flames reflected on the walls. The air smells faintly of crushed herbs and warm beeswax. A patient lies on a simple bed or mat, breathing softly. The healer sits nearby, observing. They notice the colour of the skin, the sound of the breath, the heat of the body. They listen to complaints of pain, of dizziness, of weakness. On a low table there might be small bowls and jars, each containing something gathered from the natural world. Honey, with its soothing, protective qualities. Crushed willow bark, whose compounds can ease pain, much like some modern medicines. Garlic, onions, and other plants with strong scents and noticeable effects on the body. Oils and fats to carry these substances into the skin. With a careful hand, the healer mixes ingredients, perhaps murmuring words of encouragement or calling on the gods they believe watch over health. The treatment might combine what we would now call practical medicine with ritual and incantation. For them, there was no sharp line between the two. Body and spirit, seen and unseen, were woven together in their understanding. Sometimes their remedies were surprisingly effective, aligning with what modern science has discovered about the properties of certain plants. Sometimes they were less so, shaped by trial and error in a world without microscopes or knowledge of germs. But underlying it all, there was a calm, persistent desire to alleviate suffering, to learn from what seemed to work and what did not. The Egyptians also had a unique, if solemn, window into the interior of the human body. Through their practices of preparing the dead, they saw organs, tissues and structures that most people never encountered. Without needing to dwell on any detail that might feel uncomfortable, we can simply acknowledge that over time patterns revealed themselves. They could see that the heart was central, that it occupied a vital place in the chest, that vessels extended outward from it. They understood in their own way that damage to certain parts of the body had specific consequences. A blow to the head might change a person's behaviour. A deep wound in the torso might be more dangerous than one in a limb. Broken bones, when set and immobilized, might knit back together. Imagine a patient with a broken arm being brought to a healer. There is pain, of course, a throbbing intensity around the fracture. The healer examines the arm, feeling gently for the way the bone sits, for places where it is not aligned. With slow, deliberate movements, they adjust the limb, trying to bring the broken pieces into better position. Then they wrap it in linen, perhaps stiffened with paste, creating a kind of splint. The goal is to hold everything still, to give the body the conditions it needs to repair itself. The patient might be given herbs to ease discomfort, perhaps honey on an open wound to keep it clean. Family members or attendants sit nearby, watching, caring, offering water, whispering hopes and prayers. Over days and weeks, the pain subsides, the bone strengthens, function slowly returns. The healer observes all of this, storing away the knowledge of what helped, what did not, what signs predicted recovery or decline. In other cases, the healer might examine the pulse in various parts of the body, feeling the subtle thump of the heart's regular contractions. Even if they did not fully understand the circulation of blood as we do now, they recognized that this pulse carried essential information. A strong, steady rhythm might be a good sign. A weak, flickering one might cause concern. Their writings sometimes describe the body as a network of channels or pathways through which life flows. Illness, in this view, might be the result of blockage, imbalance, or disturbance in these channels. In some ways, this is not so different from how we might think about stress or tension blocking our sense of well-being, or how we describe ourselves as run down when something in us feels depleted. Walk with me in your imagination through a garden attached to one of these healing places. Narrow paths wind between beds of plants. Tall, feathery herbs, broad-leafed greens, clusters of flowers whose petals catch the sunlight. The air is rich with green scents, some sharp and spicy, some sweet, some bitter. Bees move lazily from blossom to blossom. In the distance you can see the line of the river, always present, always offering life. A healer reaches down to pluck a sprig of a certain plant, one they know so well they could almost identify it in the dark by feel and smell alone. They crush a leaf between their fingers and lift it to their nose, checking its strength. This plant might be used to settle an upset stomach, that one to soothe an inflamed skin, another to calm a racing mind before sleep. Each plant is both itself and a piece of knowledge, a fragment of a larger living pharmacy. In your own life, you might have your own small versions of this. A cup of tea you reach for when you feel unsettled. A certain food that always feels comforting when you're unwell. The ritual of turning off screens, dimming lights, and lying down at the end of the day to send signals to your body that it is time to rest. These are small personal sciences, built from observation and repetition, growing out of the basic desire to feel better. The Egyptians' medical science, like their astronomy and their geometry, was a mixture of practical insight and deep meaning. They did not separate care of the body from care of the soul. Healing a wound, easing a fever, or comforting the grieving were all part of the same fabric. When you think about it, modern medicine also began in this same gentle place, with someone noticing that this herb helped, that cool water soothed, that touch calmed. Over centuries, those small notices turned into experiments, measurements, analyses, but at the root, there is still that simple, quiet act of compassion, to look at another human being and think, what might ease your pain? As you lie here now, perhaps with your own aches and worries, you might take some comfort in knowing that people across thousands of years have felt the same way. You are part of a long line of humans who have tried to understand the body, to care for it, to listen to its signals. You might even turn that gentle healer's gaze inward for a moment. Is there a part of your body tonight that needs a little more kindness? A tightness in the chest, a heaviness behind the eyes, A knot in the stomach, a tiredness in the legs, you do not have to fix it. You can simply notice it, as a healer might notice a symptom, and then send it a small message of warmth, like a soft light or a comforting touch in your imagination. You're allowed to rest. Your body has carried you through many days, through many experiences. It deserves this time of stillness, just as the fields along the Nile deserve their season of quiet after the harvest, waiting for the next life-giving flood. From the vast sky with its turning stars, to the precise stones of the temples, to the vulnerable human body tended in the calm light of a lamp, the science of ancient Egypt was always rooted in observation and in care. Observing the heavens, they found a sense of order. Observing the land, they created ways to share it fairly and build upon it. Observing the body, they gathered remedies and rituals that softened suffering. There is yet another realm where their curiosity turned into quiet innovation. The world of numbers and measures, the ways they counted and weighed and recorded the details of daily life. But for now, before we step into that, you can linger here for a while in this house of healing in your mind, with its garden of herbs and its gentle, attentive caretakers. If sleep is calling you, you can follow it. If your eyes are still open behind your closed lids, you can stay with the words a bit longer. Either way, you are doing exactly what you need to do. The story will be here whenever you return to it, like the Nile turning its endless curve, like the stars following their patient paths across the sky. If you are still awake, you might notice that our quiet journey has carried you through the fields, along the river, under the stars, and into the calm rooms where healers worked by lamplight. If you slipped into sleep and are only catching a few words now, that is completely all right. You have not missed anything you needed. These stories are not a test you have to pass. They are more like a gentle tide, and you can step into them at any point. Take a small moment to feel where your body is resting now, the way the mattress or blanket rises up to meet your weight, the simple fact that the ground beneath you is holding you without effort. You can let your breath move in and out at its own pace, maybe a little slower on the exhale, like a small wave sliding up the shore and then drawing back. There is nothing you have to do correctly here. Just listen or half listen or let the words blur into a soft background. We've walked with the Egyptians through their rivers and stones, their stars and healing rooms. Now, very gently, we can turn our attention to something so ordinary that it often disappears into the background of our lives. Numbers, counting, weighing, writing things down, the quiet mathematics that underlies almost everything we do. Think about the simple ways you use numbers in your own day. You might glance at the time, count the steps on a staircase, check the price of something, notice how many days are left in the week. You might have a sense of how much food is in your kitchen, how much money is in your account, how many messages are waiting for you. Perhaps you even keep lists, things to do, things to buy, things to remember. All of this is so familiar that it feels almost invisible. But once, long ago, this kind of organized counting had to be invented piece by people who needed to keep track of grain, cattle, labor, and trade. In ancient Egypt, this quiet math was the heartbeat of daily life. Imagine a small storeroom attached to a larger building. The air inside is cool and a little dusty. Rows of baskets and jars sit along the walls, filled with grain, pulses, dried fruits, and other provisions. A scribe sits at a low table near the entrance, a reed pen in hand, a piece of papyrus or a shard of pottery ready to receive marks. As workers bring in sacks of grain from the threshing floor, the scribe notes how many arrive. Not just a lot, but a specific number. Not just enough, but an amount that can be compared, divided, planned with. They may record how much belongs to the temple, how much to the state, how much to a particular household. To do this, they use symbols for numbers, a whole language built to capture amounts. You can picture those symbols as small, precise shapes, each one representing a unit, a single stroke for 1, a special mark for 10, another for 100, another for 1000, and so on. By combining them, the scribe can write down large numbers, like someone today putting digits in a row. There is a quiet satisfaction in this work, in watching messy heaps of grain turn into tidy marks on an honest page, each line a promise that the memory of this moment will remain. The Egyptians devised units for almost everything they needed to measure. For length, they used the cubit, based roughly on the length of a forearm from elbow to fingertip. Within the cubit, they had smaller divisions, palms and fingers. For weight, there were standard units used to measure metals and other goods. For volume, measures for grain and liquids. Think of the measuring cups in a modern kitchen, each with its numbers printed or etched on the side. Imagine the comfort you might feel when you know you have exactly a cup of rice or half a cup of flour, because this gives you confidence that the food will turn out as expected. In the same way, an Egyptian farmer or merchant might feel steadier knowing that a certain amount of grain has been measured out with a known unit, that the balance scales have settled equally, that the transaction is fair. Picture a simple balance scale in a marketplace. A beam suspended at its center, with pans hanging from each end. On one side a set amount of grain, on the other small standardized weights of stone or metal. The merchant gently adds or removes grain until the beam is level, until the two sides hang in perfect quiet balance. The moment when that balance is achieved is a little moment of peace, an agreement between two people, a shared understanding that this equals that. Beneath it lies the idea of equality, of fairness, of equivalence. Numbers in this sense are not just tools, they are tiny bridges between people. Behind the visible act of weighing and counting there are scribes and administrators doing more elaborate calculations. Imagine sitting beside one of these scribes in a dim but pleasant room. Sunlight filters through a small opening, painting a pale rectangle on the floor. You hear the faint rustle of papyrus, the scratch of the reed pen. The scribe uses a system of arithmetic that may look different from what you learned in school, but serves the same purpose. They add and subtract, breaking large quantities into smaller ones and recombining them. They work with fractions, not in the decimal form you may know, but as sums of unit fractions, 1/2, 1/3, 1/4, and so on. Suppose they need to divide a quantity of grain among several workers. The problem is not abstract, it is about food, fairness, wages. The scribe must figure out how to share it in a way that matches the expectations of the system and the needs of the people. They might write down something like, give each person 1 share plus a quarter share, using combinations of these simple fractional units. There is a kind of gentle cleverness in this. Like dividing a cake among friends and making sure everyone gets a fair portion, maybe even saving a small piece for later. Fractions can feel intimidating on a chalkboard, but here they are, just a way of describing how things are shared in the real world. If you think about your own life or your own life, you may find your own fractions hiding in plain sight. Splitting a bill with friends at a cafe, sharing a pizza, dividing your time in a day between work, rest, and the things you love. Even the way you portion out your energy, some for obligations, some for creativity, some for simple quiet, has a kind of unspoken arithmetic to it. In ancient Egypt, as in your life, these calculations helped make the world feel manageable. When you know how much you have and how much you need, and how much can be given or stored, the unknown feels a little less threatening. Now imagine how all of this knowledge accumulates over time. A scribe learns methods from their teacher, who learned from someone before them, and so on, back through generations. The tricks for handling tricky fractions, the best way to set up a calculation so that it works out cleanly, the most efficient sequence of steps, all of these are quietly passed along. The writing they use for these calculations is itself a refined tool. For everyday work, they often use a script we might call hieratic, a more flowing, simplified form of the famous hieroglyphs carved on temple walls. Hieratic numbers and words are drawn quickly, with a pen on papyrus or pottery shards suitable for notes, lists, receipts, and records. Picture a bundle of papyrus documents tied with a simple cord, stacked neatly in a corner. Each sheet is the record of something: a delivery of stone to a building site, a list of workers and their rations, the outcome of a harvest, a tally of goods in a storeroom. Together they form the memory of an institution, the way a modern archive or database does. Walking through such a place in your imagination, you might see rows of shelves, each holding boxes or bundles. The air is dry, preserving the fibers. Dust motes spin lazily in beams of light. The silence is profound, broken only by the occasional shuffle of a scribe retrieving or replacing a document. It is like a library of numbers and names, quietly holding the structure of the society. In your own life, you may carry your records in different ways: notes on a phone, entries in a calendar, bits of information stored on remote servers. But the purpose is similar. You keep track of things so you do not have to hold everything in your head. Lists and records are like little extensions of your memory, giving you room to rest. The Egyptians, through their counting and weighing and writing, created that same sense of external memory for their world. Knowing that a transaction was written down, that a measurement was recorded, that an agreement was captured in ink, meant that people could relax just a little. The burden of remembering every detail could be shared with the written marks themselves. If you feel like it, you can imagine your own worries or tasks for tomorrow written down somewhere safe, outside your mind. A small note in a notebook, a line on a piece of paper. A reminder waiting for you. Letting those things live elsewhere, even just in imagination, can give your thoughts permission to soften now. Tonight you do not have to hold it all. The way scribes once anchored their world to papyrus, you can trust that what truly matters will still be there when you wake. From numbers and records, we can move gently into another kind of subtle science, the understanding of materials, colours and crafts. While scribes inked symbols onto papyrus, other hands were shaping clay, carving stone, weaving fibre, and combining minerals into vivid pigments. Think about the objects around you, the fabric of your sheets, the smooth surface of your phone or lamp, the paint on your walls, the ceramic or glass of a drinking glass. Each of these has a story, how it was made, what it is made of, how people learn that this combination of elements produces this texture, this colour, this strength. In ancient Egypt, everyday life was also filled with such objects, each one a quiet testimony to experiments, discoveries and refinements passed down through generations. Imagine holding a simple clay pot in your hands. Its surface is smooth but not perfectly uniform. You can feel the faint ridges left by the potter's fingers or tool as the wet clay turned on a wheel. The colour is a warm reddish brown, deepened by firing in a kiln. This pot might hold water, grain, oil, or precious perfumes. To create it, someone had to learn which clays from which riverbanks behaved well when shaped, how long to dry the vessel before firing, how hot the kiln should be, how long the pot should stay in that heat. These are not trivial details. Too much heat and the pot cracks, too little and it remains soft, easily broken. A slightly different mixture of clay and the pot may warp or leak. Over time, potters learned to sense the right moisture by touch, the right thickness by eye, the right moment by instinct honed through countless repetitions. Now picture stone so different from clay. Hard, unyielding, yet transformable in its own way. The Egyptians quarried limestone, sandstone, granite, alabaster, and more, each with its own personality. To split, carve, and polish these materials, they had to learn which tools to use, what angles to strike at, how to support a piece so that it did not crack in the wrong place. Imagine a stoneworker in the cool shade of a quarry wall, the sun just touching the top of the rock above. They run their fingers over the surface looking for lines of weakness, veins, places where the stone will yield more easily. With practiced motions they chip away, freeing a block that will become part of a temple wall, a statue, a sarcophagus, or a simple threshold. Bronze and copper tools, sand and water as abrasives, even harder stones used to shape softer ones. This was their toolbox. Each successful cut, each polished surface was the result of long experience of tiny adjustments and corrections. Then there is colour. Picture the bright blues and greens still visible on some ancient Egyptian artifacts today, resilient despite thousands of years. To create those vivid hues, artisans experimented with minerals and firing techniques. They learned how to grind stones like malachite and lapis lazuli into fine powders, how to mix them with binders so they would cling to plaster and stone. Imagine a small workshop where pigments are being prepared. A low table holds shallow stone bowls. A worker grinds a mineral with a stone pestle, the scraping sound rhythmic and almost hypnotic. Fine dust gathers in the bowl, a rich, unexpected colour emerging from a previously dull-looking rock. Water is added, then a binder, perhaps a gum or egg-based mixture. The result is a paint that can be brushed onto walls, statues, coffins, and everyday objects, bringing scenes to life. Glass too begins to appear. Small beads, inlays, vessels. To make glass, artisans had to learn how certain mixtures of sand, ash, and other substances behave when exposed to intense heat. They had to control temperature without thermometers, relying on the colour of the fire, the glow of the molten material, and their own senses. Think of a small blue glass bead, cool and smooth against your skin. Holding it, you're touching the end point of many careful steps, gathering the raw materials, firing them at the right temperature, shaping the molten glass, cooling it slowly so it does not crack. Glassmaking is the kind of alchemy, turning earth into something that catches and transforms light. Then there is linen, the fabric that wrapped both the living and the dead. Linen begins as flax plants, with slender stalks topped by small blue flowers. The stalks are harvested, soaked, beaten, and combed to free the fibres. These fibres are then spun into threads, which are woven on looms into strips of cloth. Picture a room where weaving is happening. Wooden frames, vertical or horizontal, horizontal, hold warp threads taut. Weavers move shuttle and weft, over and under, building a fabric that grows line by line. The sound is gentle and repetitive, a soft clack, a rustle, a kind of domestic music. Fine linen requires particular care, consistent thread thickness, even tension, skilled hands. The resulting cloth might become a tunic, light and breathable in the heat, or bandages for wounds, or wrappings used in burial rituals. The same fabric used in different ways becomes clothing, medicine, and a tool of spiritual practice. In the careful preparation of the dead, which we can think of not in grisly detail but as a long, methodical craft, there were many steps and materials involved. oils and resins, salts and cloths, each used in specific sequences. The knowledge of these techniques was guarded and passed on within certain groups, like a highly specialized technical manual held in living memory. All of this, pottery, stonework, pigments, glass, weaving, preservation, is a form of science. Not science written in equations on a board, but science as lived experience. Test, observe, refine, remember, teach. If a certain firing technique cracks half the pots, change it. If one mixture of pigment fades quickly in the sun, but another remains bright, choose the sturdier one. If a certain way of wrapping a wound keeps it clean and helps it heal, keep using that method. You might think of your own small crafts or routines in this light. Maybe you cook or draw or garden or fix things. Over time, you've learnt that this amount of heat works better than that certain tools feel right in your hand, that some habits lead to better outcomes than others. Each of these is a little experiment, and your life is the notebook that records the results, even if you never write them down. The Egyptians lived surrounded by such quiet experiments. The tools they used, the houses they built, the jewelry they wore, the boats they sailed, the cosmetics they applied, the rituals they performed, all were shaped by knowledge gained through experience. Some of this knowledge has been lost. Some remains etched into stone, preserved on papyrus, embedded in objects that sit in museums now, far from their original homes. As you lie here, you might imagine yourself walking through a long gallery of such objects, but not in the bright, busy way of a daytime visit. Instead, picture the gallery after hours. The lights are dim, just enough to see by. The glass cases are quiet, their surfaces reflecting soft glows from above. You walk slowly, or perhaps you drift, pausing before a pot, a fragment of painted wall, a length of linen, a blue bead. Each object is small. Each one represents a person's hands, a person's attention, a person's trial and error turned into skill. Together they form a tapestry of understanding, a science not in grand declarations but in modest, enduring achievements, and in some gentle way this ancient knowledge is still with you. When you trust a building to stand, when you drink from a glass, when you put on clothes, when you swallow medicine, you are resting on layers of human learning that stretch back through time, all the way to places like this. If you like, you can let this realization soften into something comforting. You are not separate from the long story of human curiosity. You are one more person in a chain of people who have looked at the world and wondered how it works, who have tried to make it a little more livable, a little more beautiful, a little kinder. We've now visited many corners of that story in Egypt, the river and its floods, the fields and their measures, the stones and their alignments, the stars and their timekeeping, the body and its healing, the materials shaped into useful and beautiful forms. In the remaining part of our journey, we will gently step back, looking at how these old ideas connect to your own daily life, how knowledge flows through time like water, and how, across thousands of years, people have shared the same quiet desire to predict, to prepare, to care. For now, though, you might simply rest with the feeling that you are surrounded by these layers of knowing, like being wrapped in many soft, overlapping blankets of human experience. You do not have to hold on to any particular fact. You do not have to recall the names of stars or the details of a measuring system. It is enough to know that long before you, others were watching and learning and leaving traces for you to walk among in your imagination. And it is enough right now to let those traces drift to the edges of your awareness as your body sinks a little more deeply into rest, and your breath continues its calm, predictable rhythm, like a small, steady river flowing through the quiet of the night. If you have been traveling with this story for a while and you are still awake, you might feel as though you are returning from a very long, gentle walk. If you drifted in and out, sleeping for parts of it and waking for others, that is completely all right. You have not missed anything you needed. These words are not meant to be clung to. They are like water over river stones, smoothing and passing, whether you follow each ripple or not. Notice, just for a moment, the simple truth that your body is lying here, supported. Your head has weight. Your shoulders are held by your pillow or mattress. Your hands rest where they have decided to rest. Your breath is still moving in and out on its own. If there is any small adjustment that would make you more comfortable, you can allow yourself to make it now, and then let yourself settle again, as if you are slowly sinking into warm sand that shapes itself perfectly around you. We have visited ancient Egypt in many ways tonight. The slow flood of the Nile, the careful measurement of fields, the precise angles of stone rising towards the sky, the stars used as clocks, the hands that healed and dressed wounds, mixed herbs and listened to the body, the scribes who counted and weighed and wrote, the artisans who shaped clay and cloth and colour into objects that still carry their touch across thousands of years. Now, gently, we can step back even further. From the narrow view of one time and one place, we can open into something wider. How all of this touches your own life, here, in your bed, on this night. You live surrounded by things that carry traces of these old ideas, even if no one points them out. When you glance at a calendar, you are participating in a long tradition of counting days and marking seasons, just as the Egyptians did when they watched Sirius rise and the Nile swell. When you look at a clock, or at the glowing digits on your phone, you are inheriting their urge to give shape to time, to break the night and day into segments that can be named and understood. When you trust a building to stand, when you open a door that fits its frame, when you look down a hallway that is satisfyingly straight, you are benefiting from geometry that was once measured with ropes, sticks and walking steps across desert ground. Your walls may be built with steel and concrete rather than limestone blocks, but the same quiet logic of angles, alignment and load-bearing is at work. When you take medicine, or brew a cup of soothing tea for a sore throat, you are participating in a chain of care that began with someone, somewhere, noticing that a certain plant helped a certain pain. The Egyptians noticed that honey soothed and protected, that certain herbs eased discomfort, that wounds healed better when they were cleaned and bandaged. Their observations fed into many others, travelling across cultures and centuries until they reached the shelf or cabinet you open when you're unwell. When you wear soft cloth against your skin, when you wrap yourself in a blanket, when you choose colours you love in your clothing or your room, you are part of the same impulse that led them to spin flax into linen, to grind minerals into brilliant pigments, to adorn their walls and their bodies with hues that pleased the eye and soothed the heart. In this way, your everyday life is not separate from theirs. It is one more layer built on the foundations they helped to lay. Knowledge is like the Nile. It flows, sometimes calmly, sometimes in bursts, from one place to another, from one generation to the next. It seeps into the soil of culture, where it feeds new ideas that grow from it, often in forms that would surprise the people who first noticed the patterns. Imagine for a moment that knowledge is no longer a set of books or devices, but a river that runs through time instead of space. In your mind's eye, see this river flowing from the distant past to the unfolding future, passing by the banks of ancient cities and modern ones, watering the roots of traditions, inventions, stories. Along its banks stand people at many different times, a farmer in Egypt watching the flood, a Greek scholar reading an older text, a medieval physician copying a recipe, a scientist in a modern lab testing a compound, you sipping tea while you listen to a sleepy story. Sometimes the river runs wide and clear. Sometimes it disappears underground for a while, only to resurface somewhere else. Some ideas are carried far, spread widely, and woven into many languages. Others sink into silt and are nearly forgotten, leaving only faint traces in stone or in myth. The truth is, we rarely know exactly how any one piece of knowledge reaches us, but we can feel that we are not standing at the beginning. We are standing near the middle of a long, long flow. The Egyptians are one bend in that river. You are another. Humans in every age have wanted to predict and prepare, to know when the river will rise, when the rains will come, when the cold will arrive, to know if a treatment will help, if a structure will stand, if there will be enough food. That desire is not a weakness. It is a deeply caring impulse. We want to be ready, not only for ourselves, but for those we love. You might feel that desire in your own life, the wish to know how tomorrow will go, how your plans will unfold, what surprises might be waiting. Sometimes that wish can harden into anxiety, into worry about all the things that could happen. When that happens, it can help to remember that you are not alone in feeling this way. Across thousands of years, countless people have looked at their own versions of the Nile and asked, "What will it do next? How can I be ready?" The Egyptians answered that question with measurement and ritual, with calendars and offerings, with careful observation and prayers. Today we answer it with weather forecasts, health advice, calendars filled with appointments, apps that remind us of tasks. Underneath all the modern layers, the feeling is the same. We are small beings in a vast, sometimes unpredictable world, and we are doing our best to find gentle patterns to make the future a little less mysterious. There is comfort, too, in remembering that it's okay not to know everything. The Egyptians did not know all the reasons why their remedies worked. They did not know all the details of the stars they watched, or the ultimate stability of every structure they built. They worked with what they could see, what they could feel, what they could test, and they accepted that some mysteries remained. In your own life, there will always be things you cannot predict, outcomes you cannot fully see in advance. Tonight, as you lie here, you are allowed to put those questions down for a while. The future does not need to be solved before you sleep. It will still be there in the morning, and you will meet it with whatever knowledge and strength you've gained, just as countless others have done before you. The Egyptians also remind us that for them, observing the world was never just a cold, detached activity. It was intertwined with meaning, with story, with a sense of connection to something larger. To watch the sunrise was not just to study light and heat. It was to witness a daily renewal, a gift. To measure a field was not just to divide land. It was to participate in the ordering of a world believed to be held in balance. You may or may not think in the same terms, but you can still feel a version of that connection. When you pause to notice a sunset, when you feel moved by the quiet of a forest or the vastness of the ocean, when you look up at the night sky and feel a little awe and a little calm, you are experiencing that blend of science and something more, a sense of belonging inside a larger pattern. It is safe to rest inside that sense of belonging. You are here, in a body that has been shaped by uncountable generations of living beings finding ways to survive. You are breathing air that has passed through the lungs of others, through the leaves of plants, through the winds of the planet. The knowledge you carry, how to speak, how to walk, how to take care of yourself, is the result of many people before you watching and learning. From here, our journey can become even softer, simpler, like a painting whose lines become more blurred as we step back from it. We can let the details of ancient Egypt begin to dissolve into impressions and themes: the river, the stone, the sky, the body, the tools, the care. We can begin to drift. Imagine once more that you are on a small, safe boat on the Nile at night. You've been here before in this story, and you can return now easily. The surface of the water is dark, with a few streaks of pale light where the stars reflect. The shore is a darker band against the sky, outlined by the faint shapes of palm trees and low buildings. You are lying on your back on the deck, wrapped in a light blanket. The wood beneath you is solid and gently warm from the day's sun. The boat moves slowly, carried by the current. It is so smooth that you scarcely feel it, only a slight, soothing rocking that seems to match the rhythm of your breath. As you drift along, you pass places you have visited in your imagination. On one stretch of shore, you see fields that will soon be ready for planting. You can picture farmers measuring them after the flood, setting their boundaries, preparing to sow seeds in the dark. Fertile soil. You do not need to see the details. It is enough to know that somewhere nearby, hands are working with the earth, guided by patterns learned over generations. Further along, you pass near a cluster of buildings, some small and simple, others larger and more ornate. Rising above them on a slightly higher ground, you glimpse the silhouette of a pyramid or a temple, its lines clear even in the dim light. It stands solid and still, a shape of pure geometry against the sky. Inside, corridors and chambers curve and align, their walls carrying stories in carving and paint. You glide past, feeling the steady presence of those stones like a mountain of human intention. A little later, your boat drifts close to a place of healing. You may not see inside, but you can imagine a gentle glow from lamps, a murmur of quiet voices. Perhaps someone is mixing a remedy or binding a wound, or simply sitting at a bedside, watching over someone as they sleep. The air smells faintly of herbs, oils, and clean linen. Care is happening there, the same kind of simple, attentive care that you offer to yourself when you choose rest. Beyond that, you pass a small compound where scribes work. Even at night, a few lights stay on. Inside bent-over tables, figures record the day's counts. Grain, tools, hours of labour, offerings, transactions. Their pens move steadily, turning the flow of goods and events into lines of symbols. Outside, the world is dark and quiet, but on these pages, a structured memory is being woven. And somewhere not far away, perhaps on a flat rooftop, someone is watching the sky. They lie still, their hands folded on their chest, eyes fixed on the stars. They note when certain patterns rise, when others set. They are measuring the night in constellations and movements, turning time into something they can feel and understand. All of these scenes slide past you as you drift, not in sharp focus, but in soft, overlapping images: fields, stones, healing rooms, scribal offices, star watchers, water, earth, body, mind, sky, each one a landmark of knowledge along the river's course. Your breathing can follow this motion. Inhale as the boat glides forward. Exhale as it rocks gently, leaving ripples behind. There is nothing to steer, nothing to navigate. The river knows its way. It has been following this path for longer than memory. You are simply a passenger, a quiet sleeper on its surface. You might find that certain simple phrases start to repeat in your mind, like soft refrains in a song. The river rises, the stones stand, the stars turn, the body heals, the mind rests. The river rises, the stones stand, the stars turn, the body heals, the mind rests. You do not need to say these words out loud or even fully think them. They can drift in and out like the motion of the water, sometimes clear, sometimes barely noticeable. Their meaning is simple. Things continue. Patterns hold. You're allowed to let go if details from earlier in the story return to you. An image of a rope stretched across a field, a star painted on a ceiling, a healer's hand hovering over a patient, a scribe's careful lines. Let them come and go without effort. They are like sparks of starlight reflected on the waves. They do not demand anything from you. You might sense too that all of this knowledge, all of these efforts by people long ago, were in service of something very similar to what you wish for tonight. A feeling of safety, of enoughness, of being able to rest within a world that can never be fully controlled. The Egyptians sought that feeling in the regularity of the Nile, in the stability of stone, in the reliability of stars, in the care of healers, in the clarity of numbers. You can seek it gently in your own rhythms, in the steady beat of your heart, in the way your chest rises and falls, in the familiarity of your room, the objects you know, the walls that protect you, in the knowledge that you are held not only by your bed, but also by the accumulated understanding of countless people who work to make your world more stable. Let the story now become very light, like smoke rising and then spreading thinly in the night air. You've travelled far enough for one evening. What remains is simply the soft residue of the journey, a sense of having touched something old and vast, and yet intimately human. Tonight we visited ancient Egypt not as tourists chasing mysteries, but as quiet guests, listening to how they watched their river, shaped their stones, read their sky, cared for their bodies, counted their goods, and crafted their world. We saw that under all the difference in time and culture, their questions were very much like ours. How can we live here? How can we understand what will happen next? How can we ease pain? How can we leave something stable for those who come after us? You do not need to remember the answers they found. You can let them sink back into the deep currents of time. It is enough to know that others have walked before you, and that their footsteps have helped make your path a little smoother. Whether you have been awake this whole time or have drifted in and out of sleep, you have done exactly what you needed to do. There is no wrong way to listen to a bedtime story. If your mind wandered, that is fine. If you forgot entire stretches, that is fine. If you remained focused on every word, that is fine too. Your body and mind will take from this what they need without you having to decide. Tomorrow, if you feel like it, you might return to other quiet journeys, or back to this one, hearing different parts with fresh ears. Or you might simply carry forward a vague impression, the sense of a river, of stars, of stone, of a long human story of curiosity and care. That is more than enough. For now, there is nothing more you need to do. The tasks of tomorrow can wait. The questions of the future can rest. You have given yourself this time to soften, and that is a kind and courageous thing. As you lie here, you might picture one last image, yourself resting on the deck of that boat, wrapped in linen or in whichever fabric is most comforting to imagine, drifting slowly down the Nile under a starless sky filled with stars. The banks of the river are dark and peaceful. The water whispers its quiet, steady song against the hull. Above you, constellations wheel in their ancient paths, indifferent to haste, endlessly patient. Your breath keeps time with the water, in and out, rise and fall. You're safe here. You're allowed to let go, to let your thoughts grow softer and quieter, to let them blur like carvings seen from a distance in fading light. Sleep will come when it is ready, like a tide reaching the shore. You do not need to chase it. You can simply lie here, held by the knowledge that countless people across thousands of years have also laid down under the same stars, have also closed their eyes at the end of days filled with questions and efforts, and have also surrendered to the kindness of rest. May your body find that kindness now. May your mind loosen its grip and drift. May your dreams, if they come, be gentle and unhurried. And if there are no dreams, only deep, dark quiet, that is beautiful too. Good night, in the softest, most open-ended way. May the calm linger around you like a warm, invisible blanket long after these words have faded into silence.